Hello and welcome to Neo Psychology with me, your teacher, Mr. Neo, the channel where I teach online psychology and now apparently sociology lessons to my wonderful students. Today we're continuing with the family and household unit. We're coming to the end of the childhood chapter and today is lesson 5, has the position of children improved? Lesson 2. Let's get started, shall we? There we go. Last lesson, we were discussing whether the position of children or childhood has improved. You know, has childhood improved? Back in my day, it was like this, or back in my day, it's not like that, right? So, has it improved is the point. We were looking at the march of progress view, and that's the view that the position of children has improved dramatically over time. Today, we'll be looking at the conflict view. What's the conflict view? If the march of progress view is looking at the position of children has improved dramatically over time, the conflict view might not be that. Let's have a look. We've got 3 learning objectives today. Number 1, show comprehension and apply knowledge of the conflict theory. LO2, identify and analyze inequalities among children. And learning objective 3, to understand and explore inequalities between children and adults. There we go. Let's start with learning objective 1. The conflict theory. The march of progress view is the position that the position of children has improved dramatically in a relatively short period of time. Childhood has got better. Oh, back in my day, we didn't have the stuff that you did. Okay, that's the march of progress view. However, conflict sociologists such as Marxists and feminists dispute this. They argue that society is based on a conflict between different social groups, Marxist, and different such as social classes or gender, feminists. In this conflict, some groups have more power, status, or wealth than others, okay? Nothing's fair according to the Marxists and feminists. Everything's to do with society and social class according to Marxists, or everything's to the advantage of men according to feminists. Conflict sociologists like Marxists and feminists see the relationship between groups as one of the dominations and subordination in which dominant groups act as oppressors. So, conflict sociologists argue that the march of progress view of modern childhood is based on a false and idealized image that ignores important inequalities. They criticize the march of progress view on 2 grounds. 1, there are inequalities among children in terms of the opportunities they risk and risks they face. Many today remain unprotected and badly cared for. So it's saying some children don't have the same opportunities that others do, and it's unequal. And 2, the inequalities between children and adults are greater than ever. Children today experience greater control, oppression, and dependency, not greater care and protection. So it's saying that it's unequal, not just among children and adults. It's also unequal between children and other children as well. And we're going to look at these in a bit more detail now. But first of all, here's a question. Give yourself 2 minutes, pause the video and answer the question. Question. Give the 2 criticisms that the conflict view makes of the march of progress view. Pause the video, give that a go. Don't cheat. I know what you're like. Right, I'm going to go through the answer now. The conflict theorists, like Marxists and feminists, argue that the march of progress view is an overgeneralized and idealized image. It's too positive and not realistic. 1, it ignores inequalities among children, and 2, between children and adults. There we go. That might be one of the questions in the exam, you know, to discuss childhood. And then you can come up with your answers about, well, the march of progress you suggest is better than ever. However, there are evaluative points to argue that it's not better. Here's 2 of them. That's the conflict view. Very, very simple, okay? It's just saying, no, things are not better. And we're going to have a look at the conflict view in a bit more detail on how things are not better according to the conflict theorists or sociologists. Identify 1 thing you have learned about the conflict view. Why do you think learning about the conflict view is important? And how does the conflict view apply in real life? How does it apply in real life? Right. Any question you're still wondering, let me know. And that's learning objective 1 done already. We're smashing it. Well done. Learning objective 2. Identify and analyze inequalities among children. And you can see learning objective 3 is inequalities between children and adults. So we're looking at these ideas now of the conflict view. How are there inequalities among children? Not all children share the same status or experiences. For example, children of different nationalities are likely to experience different childhoods and different life chances, of course. 90% of the world's low birth weight babies are born in developing countries. Okay, the majority of developing countries come in Africa and Asia, and I'd say some in South America as well. But there you go, 90% of the world's low birth weight babies, those babies that are malnourished, babies that aren't getting the food from the mother that it needs. There are also gender differences. So it's not just about racial or class differences. There's also gender differences between children. For example, according to Mayer Hillman in 1993, boys are more likely to be allowed to cross or cycle on roads, use buses, and go out after dark unaccompanied. Jens Bonk found that girls do more domestic labor, especially in lone parent families, where they do 5 times more housework than boys. Have the girls experienced that? Or have the boys experienced that? Have the girls experienced that maybe if they've got siblings, male siblings, that they do more housework than them? Or if you're a male sibling, your sister potentially does more work than you. Have you experienced that? Is there evidence to support this? But according to the research, there are differences between genders. Boys are more likely to be let out alone at night, whereas the women and the girls are not. Similarly, there are ethnic differences. Julia Brannan's study of 15 to 16-year-olds found that Asian parents were more likely than any other parent to be strict towards their daughter. No, you're not going out. Similarly, Barty found that ideas of izzat, which is family honor, could be a restriction, particularly on the behavior of girls. I believe that's a Muslim thing. I don't know about it. I don't know in too much detail. Some of the Muslim students will know more about that. I don't know if I'm pronouncing izzat correctly. Izzat, maybe that's it. There are also important class differences or class inequalities between children. 1, poor mothers are more likely to have low birth weight babies, which in turn is linked to delayed physical and intellectual development. So if your mum isn't malnourished, if your mum is malnourished or not getting enough nutrition, you're going to be underweight. And when you're underweight, it's not a positive thing. What it's saying is it's going to link to delayed physical and intellectual development. You're not going to be as smart. 2, class inequalities. Children of unskilled manual workers are over 3 times more likely to suffer from hyperactivity and 4 times more likely to experience conduct disorders than the children of professionals. I found that really interesting. If you're a manual worker, your children are 3 times more likely to suffer from ADHD or hyperactivity. Isn't that interesting? Hyperactivity or ADHD doesn't seem like something that would be determined by class, but apparently, according to the research, it is. You're 3 times more likely to suffer from ADHD if you come from a manual working class background, and 4 times more likely to experience conduct disorder than the children of professionals. And then 3. The third class inequality is that children born into poor families are also more likely to die in infancy or childhood, to suffer long-standing illness, to be shorter in height, to fall behind at school, and to be placed on the child protection register. Right, there's a lot of things there. So apparently, if children are born into poor families, if you're in a poor family, you're more likely to suffer from illnesses. You're more likely to be shorter, apparently. You're more likely to fall behind at school and be placed on some sort of child protection register. So they're saying there are inequalities among children, right? Some children have more benefits than others. Thus, we cannot speak of children in general as if they were all equal. Social class, gender, and ethnic differences affect their life chances. Okay? So this idea, this conflict theory, is suggesting, well, actually, you can't talk generically and say children get this, children get that. No. Some children get this, some children get that. Other children do not get the same benefits. Okay? And that's what they found. Question. Give examples of the inequalities among children in relation to 1. Gender, 2. Ethnicity, and 3. Class. Pause the video, give those 3 a go. Give an example of the inequalities. So you would say there are inequalities among children in relation to gender, ethnicity, and class. One example of the inequalities within gender are, write in full sentences. One inequality in terms of ethnicity is, and a third inequality between class is, blah, blah, blah. And you give your answer. Write it in full sentences as you would in the exam, because it's an essay-based test. Here we go. Answer. In Western societies, there are gender differences. For example, girls are expected to do more housework. There are ethnic differences. For example, Asian parents are more likely than parents of other ethnic groups to be stricter towards daughters than sons. And there are also class inequalities. For example, poor children are more likely to die in infancy and do badly at school. There we go. Lovely. That's a nice, full-rounded, proper good sentence paragraph. And there we go. That's inequality among children. Identify one thing you learned about inequalities among children. Why do you think learning about inequalities among children is important? Why is it important to know about this? It's important to know because sometimes when sociologists, they speak about children in general, it's children, you go, well, actually, you can't make such generalizations because children are all different. All these children are different, as we've seen from this. If you come from an Asian background, you might not have the same experiences if you come from a white background. If you come from a lower class, you might have the same experiences as you come from a working class background. And if you're a boy, you might have a different experience than to girls. How does inequalities among children apply in real life? A lot of you have experience of this. Some people say, oh, it's not fair. Girls get to do this or boys get to do this. Examples. Give some examples. Back up your evidence. And then what questions has inequalities among children raised for you? What are you still wondering about? Have you got any questions? Let me know if you've got any questions and I'll be happy to answer them. There we go. We're running through this one. Learning objective 2. Identify and analyze inequalities among children. Learning objective 2 is complete. Can I tick it off? You sure? You sure you understand it though? Alright, good. I'll tick it off. We're on to learning objective 3 now, right? To understand and explore inequalities between children and adults. This is going to be a short lesson. Okay. Inequalities between children and adults. There are also major inequalities of power between children and adults. March of Progress writers argue that adults use this power for the benefit and protection of children, for example, by passing laws against child labour. So, according to the March of Progress view that says children have got it better than they ever had before, they would say, well, the reason why the adults have more power than the children is because they know better for them, and they know better because they're trying to protect them, and they do this through passing laws, such as laws against child labour. However, the conflict theory doesn't necessarily agree. However, critics, such as Firestone and Holt, argue that many of the things that March of Progress writers see as care or protection are in fact just new forms of oppression and control. They're saying children are being oppressed, they're being pushed down, they're not giving a free say, they're not getting the same rights as the adults and control. The same way that feminists would argue that women are being oppressed, they're being pushed down, they're not getting the same equality. They would say these sociologists are arguing that, well, actually, according to the conflict view, they're being oppressed and controlled by adults. They're not getting the same rights as adults, and that's for sure. Children and adults don't necessarily have the same rights, and they're not necessarily being protected. They're being controlled. Firestone gives an example. For example, Firestone argues that protection from paid work is not a benefit to children, but a form of inequality. It is a way of forcibly segregating children, making them more dependent, powerless, and subject to adult control than previously. So you may agree or disagree with that potentially. You may say, well, no, I think it's quite obvious that these protections are put in place to support children so they don't get taken advantage on and they're not and they're deciding to go to work to make money rather than go to school because education is clearly more important. However, according to Firestone, he's going, no. The reason why children are being stopped, or the fact that they are being stopped, is a way of control of them. So they're dependent on their families. They're dependent on adults because they won't have money and they won't have power. So they have to be dependent. So it's a way of oppressing children, according to Firestone. You may agree or disagree with that. These critics see the need to free children from adult control, and so their view is described as child liberationism. Adult control takes a number of forms. So they're saying this is child liberationism. They're saying we want to liberate the children, we want to liberate them. I want to be my own person. I don't want to be controlled by adults or my parents. Okay? Okay. Neglect and abuse. Adult control over children can take the extreme form of physical neglect or physical, sexual or emotional abuse. Okay, those are the types of abuse. There's neglect, physical, sexual or emotional abuse. Okay, in 2013, 43,000 children were subject to child protection plans because they were deemed to be at risk of significant harm, most often from their own parents. Okay, so let's have a quick look at the table here. This is children who were the subject of a child protection plan as of 31st of March 2013 in England. So we can see just short of 18,000 children were neglected. So that means they were either left alone or not given food, or like left all dirty is what I imagine. Physical abuse, so that's a physical hitting someone, punching, I don't know, examples. Sexual abuse, 2,000 people got sexually abused in 2013. Emotional abuse, 13,500 people, that's massive. And those that suffered multiple abuses was 4,870. So you can see, this is supporting the idea that there's inequalities between children and adults, and it can be the result of neglect and abuse. The charity Childline receives over 20,000 calls a year from children saying they have been sexually or physically abused. Such figures indicates a dark side to family life of which children are the victims. Okay? Call Childline. Control over children's space. Children's movements in industrial societies such as Britain are highly regulated. For example, shops may display signs such as no school children. Children are told to play in some areas and forbidden to play in others. There is increasingly close surveillance over children in public spaces such as shopping centres, especially at times when they should be in school. So if you came from the child liberationism perspective, you would say, that's so wrong. How can they say no school children? Because it's the example of saying no women allowed in this shop or no black people allowed in this shop. That's how they deem it. They deem it as a prejudice against children. It's an ageism. Similarly, fears about road safety and stranger danger have led to more and more children being driven to school rather than travelling independently. For example, in 1971, 86% of primary school children were allowed to travel home from school alone. Right, that's primary school children. By 2010, this had fallen to 25%. According to Hugh Cunningham in 2007, the home habitat of 8-year-olds, the area in which they are able to travel home, has shrunk to 1/9 of the size it was 25 years earlier. So what they're saying is, if this was your home here, they're saying that before there would be a really large parameter of where the children could walk or go for travel, go to the park or whatever. And now they're saying nowadays the home habitat of 8-year-olds, the area in which they were able to travel alone, has shrunk to 1/9. So it's much smaller. So literally like right outside your house potentially. Right. Whereas before we could see that people had different ideas. People had different mentalities. Children are more independent. You know, they'll go and walk to school. Right, see you later. Go to school. Have a good one. Sort yourself out. Make sure you get lunch. Yeah, we'll do, mum. See you later. You know, back in the 70s, apparently 86% of primary school children are allowed to travel home. Now, that does seem a bit weird if you think about it. You know, primary school children are really young potentially, you know, from between 5 and 10 years old. That does seem a bit young to send them off. But back then, no, it was clearly the norm with 86% of primary school children doing it. Now, this has fallen from 2010 to around 25%, much smaller. So there we go. This control and surveillance contrasts with the independence of many children in developing countries today. So, for example, Cindy Katz in 2004 described how rural Sudanese children roam freely both within the village and for several kilometers outside the village. So, this is an example of cultural differences now, okay? So, depending on the culture you're in, depends on what might be deemed childhood, or might be deemed what a child is allowed to do. Apparently, in Sudan, children roam freely, you know, and they can go several kilometers outside their own village. They probably have more independence, you can see. And there's also control over children's time as well. Adults in modern society control children's daily routines, including the times when they get up, eat, go to school, go home, go out, play, watch television, and sleep. Think about that. They're being controlled. If you think of it from the child liberationalism perspective, they're saying we're being controlled here. We're told when to do things, what to do, and when to do it. Adults also control the speed at which children grow up. It is they who define whether a child is too old or too young for this or that activity, responsible or behaviour. So, you're too old for Father Christmas now. I need to tell you, it's not real, it's me. But Mum, I'm 3. I don't care, you're an adult now. Behave like one. Okay? You get told, Mum, I want my bottle still. No, you're 11. Put that bottle of milk down, you're too old. This contrasts with Holmes' findings that among Samoans, too young is never given as a reason for not letting a child undertake a particular task. Okay, in Samoa, they go, no, too young is not an excuse. That's never a reason. Control over children's bodies as well. Adults exercise enormous control over children's bodies, including how they sit, walk, and run, what they wear, like sun hats, makeup, glasses, their hairstyles, and whether or not they can have their ears pierced. It is taken for granted that children's bodies may be touched in certain ways by certain adults. They are washed, they are fed, they are dressed, they have their heads patted, right? They have their hands held, they are picked up, they are cuddled, they are kissed, and they may be disciplined by smacking, okay? Think about that. If I try to, think about a parent and a mother and what they do and all the ways they touch a child's body. If I was to do that to anyone else in the world, that would be inappropriate. You know, if I told someone, you need to sit more straight, or stop running, you need to walk, put on some sun cream. Oh, don't wear so much makeup. It would be quite controlling. It sounds controlling, doesn't it? Right? Holding someone's hand or patting them on the head, giving them a cuddle or a kiss, whether they want it or not. Being disciplined by smacking. These are all examples of control according to this approach. At the same time, adults restrict the ways in which children may touch their own bodies. So, for example, a child might be told to not to pick their nose. Don't pick your nose. That's wrong. Don't suck your thumb. Or stop playing with your genitals. You're always doing that. This contrasts with the sexual freedoms enjoyed by children in some non-industrial cultures, such as the Trobriand Islands. Sounds fun, I might go there on holiday. In industrial societies, children have only limited opportunities to earn money. Okay? So there's control over children, access to resources. Right? Children don't have as many access to resources because they're not working, so they have less money, of course. So in industrial societies, children have only limited opportunities to earn money. so they may remain dependent economically on adults. They will be dependent economically. Labour laws and compulsory schooling exclude them from all but the most marginal, low-paid, part-time employment. The only jobs they can usually do is like a paper round, and that pays so poorly. It's like £3 an hour or something, and you wake up at like 5 in the morning to go and give around newspapers. It ain't worth it. Pocket money given by parents may depend on good behaviour, and there may be restrictions on what it can be spent on. Yeah, you will get your pocket money if you do your chores, if you do this, if you do that. Although the state pays child benefits, this goes to the parent, not the child. Yes, any benefits that get given to the child, that are for the children, it doesn't go to the children, does it? It goes to the adults, and the adults decide where it goes. Control over children's access to resources. All this contrasts with the economic role of the children in developing societies today and in European societies of the past. For example, Katz found that Sudanese children were already engaged in productive work from the age of around 3 or 4 years old. And this is how it was in European countries, but in the past. And we found that it's still the case in some non-European countries, in some developing countries. Children are still expected to do these things. They're still treated like adults, or they're treated more similarly to adults and given more responsibilities. So in one example is the Sudanese children already engaged in productive work from the age of around 3 or 4. Right. You can go and do some work. You can chip in, can't you? Off you go. Go and do some work. Okay. Question. Give an example of each of the following ways in which adults control children. 1. Neglect and abuse. 2. Control over children's space. 3. Control over children's time. 4. Control over children's bodies. And 5. Control over children's access to resources. Okay, pause the video, give that a go, write in full sentences, and upload your notes online so I can see that you've done the work. And there we go, that's it. That's inequality between children and adults. Identify one thing you learned about inequality between children and adults. Why do you think learning about inequality between children and adults is important? And how does inequality between children and adults apply in real life? You know, what questions are you still wondering about? You got any questions? Think about your own life experiences. Have you experienced inequalities when you were a child, or even now, if you're still deemed a child in your household in comparison to the adults? Do you have the same rights as your parents? Are you allowed to go out when you want? Are you allowed to get a job if you want to? Are you allowed to go to bed when you want to? Are you allowed to eat what you want? Some of these things are evidence of inequalities between children and adults. And there we go. That's learning objective 3 sorted. I'm going to tick it off. Yes? Good. There we go. Plenary. We're on to the plenary. There we go. Summarize. Summarize. Has the position of children improved into one sentence, and then try and reduce it down into 5 words. And there you go. Here's a task. Create a mind map for the position of children has improved. Consider the following: inequalities among children and inequalities between children and adults, right? The conflict view. They're saying that there's lots of inequalities between children and adults, and there's lots of inequalities among children in themselves, right? What do they say? There we go. There's today's lesson, right? Thank you for joining today's lesson. Today was lesson 5. Has the position of children improved too? Next lesson is lesson 6, age patriarchy. We're going to have a look at a bit of that. Be sure to submit your notes online for this lesson. Well done, my neo-psychologist or my neo-sociologist. Great work today. God bless. Do the work. And peace.
I'm feeling like Will. I feel like a prince. I'm feeling myself. I'm loaded with bills, cause I wasn't blessed with no Uncle Phil. Don't know how it feels. I wanted to flex, they told me to chill. I'm making a flip. My life is a flick, now load up the film.